Number one is there's a real brief discussion of debt service in there, and I'd like to add, that little chart that Mitzi built you that shows the debt service profile, add that as a visual so you can kind of see what your debt service looks like. Second, Mike Andreas has a model that's essentially what are the components of a safe school, and it was just hard to fit in a short period of time, but we're going to look for a way, and all these will probably be in the appendices, so it won't make it less readable, but you'll be able to see that kind of list of what are the components of a safe school physically. And then the third thing is just a little bit of discussion about some of the tools that the planning department has added this year to improve the way they do business, concurrency management and GIS mapping at the top of that list. So we just didn't have time to get it in for today's work session, but between now and when you vote, we've talked about adding those things. So.
And just one quick note on the, not related to the CIP, but more of an update since I'm here for safety and security. This evening and next Tuesday at 6 p.m. we have community workshop. As we promised the community in the Alta Vista neighborhood, we would come and talk to them about what design alternatives we could do for improving bike and bike ped conditions around Sarasota High School as part of the vacation application. We are meeting with them tonight at 6. We're meeting with them again next week at 6. Our intent is to put in the application by the 13th. Don't quote me. The second week of July, so that we would make it to a September 11th planning board meeting, and then a October and November hearings of the city commission. So, but just to let you know kind of where we stand with that, we do have our community workshops, and then we're going to be then we'll complete the application for vacation of School Avenue.
I go by that several times a day, and the light is flashing. It says School Avenue is closed and put the time on it. I look down and School Avenue is open. I mean, because why is that light still flashing in the summer?
Yeah, I've noticed that too. It's by the interlocal, which has passed. If I don't think we've met since.
Who turned that light on?
It's just on an automatic thing, but by the interlocal, it is open during the summer. Summer
Well, I
months,
understand it's open, but why is the light flashing saying it's closed? I mean, at least turn the light off.
I'll talk to our city partners. It's our city partners. We'll make sure they do.
I have to watch our time, but I know I'm glad you brought that up because there's been a lot of work behind that too as well. So, any other comments, questions?
Great job.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Well done. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I think you're dismissed. Next up is 2018-19 operating budget. Mitzi Corcoran. Where did I put?
I got most of my questions.
I printed one off, and then I got one when I got here. Is this the same one that I printed?
Yes. Okay. I think so. There's been no changes since then.
No.
You haven't changed anything, have you? Haven't snuck anything
No changes at all.
Right.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Good morning, everyone.
Thanks for being patient. I know we're running a little behind, but
Oh, see, I thought you guys were ahead. I was like, man, they're just
Are we?
doing really, really great today. But
maybe we caught up.
so we last met and had any conversations regarding the operating budget in April, but it was pretty much more of a security conversation than an operating budget conversation, but you were presented with some budget information. So we thought we'd just kind of bring you up to speed on where we're at now with the current year and where we'll be, or where we think we're going to be for next year, or where we project to be. So, and I've asked Krista to come. She's the one who's doing all the heavy lifting, and so she is the shell answer lady, or the budget answer lady. So, so I wanted her to jump in here and make it a little more conversational for us all. Oh, perfect. Can you just put those on the table back in the back? Thank you so much. I forgot the copies up in my office for the public. So as far as 17-18 goes, since you last saw us, we've gotten the fourth calculation of the FEFP, so we had a few more students that we were funded with. So, but in addition to those additional students, quite a few of them were McKay students who are receiving scholarships, so the money's in, the money's out. So it was a net difference. And then you guys had a presentation on the FTE audit, and those funds were taken out for the changes based on the FTE audit. So there was a loss of funding, a little over $100,000. We got about $445,000 more. The McKay scholarships were about $137,000, and then we got $100,000 in FTE.
Explain McKay scholarships.
Those are scholarships that students are eligible to receive if they have an approved 504 plan, and they can take those funds to attend a private school. But we have to include them in our FTE counts in order to receive the funding, but the state retains the funds and sends it away. So we have to be very careful to make sure we're including all of those students.
So this is one of the voucher programs that are used a lot of times for private school funding.
Correct. But with the criteria, yes, that the student has an approved 504 plan. And then under local funds, we actually, I'm sure you guys are all well aware, the Fed keeps raising interest rates. So we are the recipients from a revenue side of additional interest income, pretty substantial. We also had Ashton Elementary started a child care program at their school this year. So the overall child care funds are higher as a revenue stream this year. So those are pretty much the only changes this year from the last time we talked regarding our revenues. On the expenditure side, we have we did an increase in our estimates for the amount of terminal leave pay because there are some of us, oh, he's left, who are leaving us. So, and quite a couple of long-term principals who are leaving us. So we've increased that funding, and it's the final results of the administrative increases that were finalized. The employee benefits, we are not seeing as much utilization of that. I don't know if there are less people taking advantage of it or if we just over-projected originally, but it's a little bit lower, and it's pretty much in the group insurance payments. Purchase services, that's quite a bit higher. It's for support for our students. These are in pretty much areas we can't hire people. Speech language pathologists, sign language interpretation, there seems to be a
Were
pickup
the
in that.
resource
what I
officers
was
for
gonna-
the end of the year in here too?
Yes,
Okay,
they're
that's
in
what,
here
yeah,
also.
that's what I was going to ask also. That's-
They were already in there when we discussed the conversation in April because we had already contracted with them. So this is just the change since April. But yes,
So the 571 increase is in addition to the contract?
what we had had before.
Okay.
But the biggest component of this is the expansion of the summer learning academies to 7 more schools. So, the teachers, those are all under contracted services. They're all paid
Okay.
under contract. So that's the predominant increase is the summer learning academies.
And the money that we got from the state won't be used till next summer?
It's not, it's 18-19, so we could use it in July. The bigger component of that, which I hadn't realized at the time, was those funds are dependent upon the state receiving,
The FEMA money.
yes, state receiving FEMA money, so it's a contingent. There's also an additional $5 million of charter school capital outlay tied to those FEMA dollars. So if the state receives a certain amount of FEMA reimbursement back to their coffers, we will receive the $500,000 from the state for our summer learning academies. Charter schools will receive $5 million more in capital
Do you happen
outlay
to know?
funding.
I know nobody knows, but do you know when they expect that so we can?
I was like, that's a big contingency from.
Well, it is, but it's not necessarily, I think, dependent on IRMA reimbursement. I mean, we had Matthew. I think that's
what's
probably what they're
outstanding.
looking at more is Matthew
Because it can be 3 to
reimbursement.
6 years
But
sometimes.
sometimes it can take a very long time. Other times they're faster.
So I just want to, for the Sesame Street version, so if it's 3 to 6 years, that means we're not going to get this next year.
We may not, correct.
Well, if it's 3 to 6 years, then
But you're thinking Irma,
Well, even Matthew.
Matthew
Or it
was,
could have been, I mean, it could be, I have no idea what storms that they're talking about, to be
Yeah,
honest with you.
But-
We have lots of issues here
you
with
know,
our
I just want to make sure.
fires and other things.
So
too.
let's say they got the money in 1920. Well, 1819's closed out. Does that mean we don't get the money? Or is it if they get the money during that fiscal year, we get the money? Or is it whenever they get the money, we get? Am I making sense?
yep.
Yes, no, and it's just contingent. That's all we read was it was contingent. It's the 18-19 budget, so
if that budget, if July 1st, 2019, they get the money, then we're, to use Ms. Brown's point of view, we're SOL?
It could be.
No, I wanted a better,
I thought you would mean Spanish for sun.
yeah, that's right, the sun will come out.
That's right.
When are we going to get our IRMA reimbursement?
We have some already that have been approved through FEMA, and they're working through, we have to apply to FEMA and apply to the state, because it's a 75, 12 and a half, 12 and a half kind of split.
Okay.
We have not yet received any money. We meet every week. FEMA comes here every Thursday, and I have one staff member who spends the entire day, all day, every Thursday with FEMA, working on our reimbursements. They're doing a really good job. FEMA's been a really great partner. They've provided us with a lot of really great information. There are 5 of our shelters that are now being excluded because the requirement, they believe, is they need to be fully funded by the state, from the state's claim. So we may never see those dollars.
Say
I'm
that
not
one
sure.
more time. Say that one more
There were 5 shelters that were opened at state request. So the county went and got an opinion on those particular 5 that said that those should be state reimbursed as part of the state's claim. So we would have to submit those expenditures under a mutual aid agreement and have the state reimburse us. The only good thing about that is you get 100% reimbursement, and you get the reimbursement maybe if the state gets their FEMA funding. The same with the county. There was a decision that was made that based upon state statute, it was the county's responsibility for the shelters. So we would just submit our expenditures to the county for the other shelters and hopefully get reimbursed for those 14. So not exactly sure where we're at with those things, but we're still working through all of those wonderful details.
Always lots of terms and conditions and complex business of educational funding, right, Mitzi?
Yes.
So that's
yes.
FEMA. That doesn't matter. It's not just education. That's everywhere.
Well, and unfortunately, with each event, the rules are different.
Yeah,
so
that's
I'm preaching to the choir with Bridget. I'm sure she fully understands.
And just before you leave that point, you've not projected that revenue, that when it arrives, we'll be thankful. But as far as any of our revenue projections, we're not anticipating receiving FEMA funds as part of this budget projection.
But the same would go for the.
But if they do, they'll go to reserves, and you'll see a change in your fund.
I want to know, can we go out for banana splits or something fun?
Is
Will we
she
get it?
projecting the 500,000 from the state?
Okay, hold on one second. So you're talking about the FEMA funding.
FEMA, correct.
And then the second part was, next step, I think, would be to just, is the additional summer school allocation included in there?
Okay. So for 17-18, there's no revenue for FEMA reimbursement. 18-19, there's no funds for FEMA reimbursement. 18-19, we have $500,000 in revenue in the budget for summer learning academies,
So,
as it was a line item. It wasn't until like the other day when I actually read all of the fine print and went,
That's a big
there's
contingency.
strings on those dollars.
Eric?
Is there a point in time, Superintendent, where you would say, okay, we haven't got the money, so we're not going to have summer learning academies next summer?
Absolutely not. We're committed to summer learning if we have to fund those ourselves.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Good.
So for 17-18, there's a small reduction in energy services. There was a temporary rate increase with FPL because of Hurricane Matthew that ended at the end of March. So beginning in April, the old rates restored. So there's a small change here. You'll see it in 18-19 also. Materials and supplies this year are quite a bit higher. I think it's mainly purchases made by STC South, getting them up and running. So I think that's what we're seeing as an increase.
Increase from our projection?
This is the change since the last time when we projected. Yes.
Right.
So and I think it's just, getting a school started, you have a lot of initial things getting, that are consumable in nature, but you get them supplied in the school that we didn't necessarily have accounted for, I guess.
So
Since April?
do we have the money for that? I guess,
It's workforce fund.
that's okay. That's what I wanted to clarify too, so. Okay.
And then the last thing is just, it says the word increase. That was based on the April projection. We've had to purchase a lot more tests. We're doing way more testing for AP, IB, ACE, which is great. Much more rigorous curriculum, but that is not as high as what we had originally anticipated. So, anything else?
That's interesting.
That you wanted to? offer?
No.
Okay.
Just the purchase services for charter schools went down, and that was just because of the fourth calculation.
Reduced FTE, correct?
Right.
Thanks. So the net result of all of those increases and decreases is a decrease of $23,000 from the last projection. So not a substantial change. We still think the ending fund balance unassigned will come in at 10.05%. So.
I'm talking to some charter schools in South County who think that their enrollment will be down next year. Our enrollment is up in some schools, or projected to be up in some
Correct.
schools, but not a great deal.
Correct. And I think our charter schools historically, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, tend to project high so that they can get every dollar that they feel they're going to earn.
Eric?
What's the total projection that we're projecting our students to go up by?
400?
I don't know
like-
that off the top of my head.
No, not including
Based-
charter schools.
Based on the I don't have that. I just got total projection
I
based on
think
the
it was around
conference.
300 something for just the district schools.
From a district name school.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact number. And charters always tend to over-project, and to your point, Jane, what they do is they work with us. If they think that they're going to be lower, then they adjust that with us through the year.
Yeah, so they don't get overpaid, because we pay
And
them
then they'll have to
monthly, so
reimburse them.
they'll work with us, and we make sure we don't overpay them so that they get all of their money up front, and then they find themselves in a bit of a cash flow issue later.
That's a good point to note out, because I don't know that other districts are as collaborative in that element, so kudos.
We work very closely with them. So closely, actually, I just wanted to let you know, we're actually doing a webinar training with all of the financial folks, including the external auditors for our charter schools, to make sure that they're doing their financial reporting correctly. There's been a kind of bit of a change with the capital funding, the kind of influx of capital funding that they received. The state actually sent out guidance on, because I think they just reported everything in one giant lump. And so when we actually started really looking at the statements, noticed quite a few inconsistencies. So we're, Valerie Maggi, the accounting supervisor, and Krista are going to be holding a webinar with all of the financial folks. So I think it'll be very helpful to everybody. So for 18-19, there again are not substantial changes, other than you'll see there was an increase in the McKay enrollment, so we've reduced the state funds by a little bit. Also, the interest in the child care funds carry over. However, the preliminary assessed values came in lower than what were sent with the conference report. So the state had projected a 6.73%. Our preliminary values came in at only 6.21, which between the voted millage and the discretionary results in about a $500,000 revenue loss. Yeah. So as a result, the offset with the child care and the interest income netted about a $70,000 change. And then as far as the transfers, the charter PICO, we had done an initial calculation after recalculating based upon statewide charter enrollment. It actually is going up a little bit more. Again, it's all still an estimate. The state is the one that does the final numbers. And actually, when you guys were talking about the funds for charter schools, you were absolutely correct. There are 70% of the charter school students were below the state average in terms of, like, 5 of the 6 largest districts in the state were all below the 17-18 statewide average in per student funding for charters, which may have been what influenced some of the change in the legislation, at least for 18-19. So for salaries, there is an increase predominantly from the shift from contracted services to employees for the school police department. There were also positions that were waived through restricted fund sources to increase guidance counselors at some of the schools. Some of the schools take their AP and IB money, reallocate it to those teachers, which frees up general revenue for them to purchase what we call units. So if they feel they need additional guidance resources, social worker resources, aides at their school, sometimes they'll take a teaching unit, convert it to 2 aides at the school. So they work with their executive directors to best meet their school's needs, and so those changes are built in here as additional units. For the most part, all of those funds that pay for them are restricted, so it doesn't have an impact on our unassigned fund balance. There were some grant funding reallocations. We had positions that were funded in the budget with grants. Those grants have gone away, but the need for those positions has stayed. And we added a bus aide. So the increase in benefits is the corresponding change in the increase in the positions, which is offset again by the reduction in purchase services for contracts. So it's about a $600,000 net difference, most of which is coming from restricted funds to pay for. In terms of energy efficiencies, again, we have the rate decrease or the adjustment for the removal of the increase, I guess is what's the easiest way to say that, from the Hurricane Matthew temporary increase.
Oh, okay.
The projected increase that we had thought we were going to have in 18-19 anyway. And then we have a bunch of energy efficient products that we have installed in our schools, and there's a rebate that's coming back that we're anticipating receiving next year that should help offset some of those expenditures. Materials and supplies, again, the largest portion of that is for the new police department. And again, the overall expenditures in materials and supplies was higher last year, so we're just trying to provide us with enough funding to be appropriate for that. This is, the next one is capital outlay, again, for the police department. So we have those funds that are paid for out of the capital outlay fund itself, but most equipment is purchased through the general fund, general operating, and comes to the district through a capital transfer. So we think we'll need to outfit the police department with some capital items. So that's included in there, which is paid for with the transfer. So again, the net difference is an increase to the unassigned fund balance of $729,000. Of course, you'll see above the ending gross fund balance is going down by $200,000. That's because we're tapping into about $930,000 of restricted funds. So either AP funds, IB funds, school allocation funds, ACE funds, correct? Workforce funds. It could be any number of those types of things that are not just falls to the bottom line unrestricted.
Shirley.
Well, I'm glad that the budget has us still staying above our 7.5% requirement, but we are spending more than we're bringing in, and there's a lot of issues tied to that, including the raise that we're giving our teachers. But those things are recurring expenses. And the money in the fund balance isn't necessarily recurring.
Correct.
It's a one-time thing. So, I mean, we may have problems next year depending upon how we're funded from the legislature. Because if we're funded at a zero, when in fact it wasn't even zero, it looks like we got, almost $1 million less under the FEFP with the new formula than we had the year before.
Correct.
There may be some major adjustments we have to make next year if the base student allocation doesn't increase.
Yeah, it'll be very...
Or if they turn around and put all of the funding for the police into the base student. I mean, there's any number of things that can happen that...
Absolutely.
They can say we got more money, but we don't. So I'm a little concerned about that, and I think it's going to take all of us working together to make sure. We'll talk about that with our lobbyists this afternoon, because that funding is going to be very important. Otherwise, we might have some problems next year because those recurring expenses can take us below that 7.5% next year, so we have to watch that. Glad to see that we're above the 7.5% with all these things that have come up that we weren't expecting.
Correct.
That we're still able to do that. And sometimes you're like pulling a rabbit out of a hat that you're able to do this. And I'm glad we're able to make those changes to do that. But I am concerned about the recurring expenses from the non-recurring
Funding source.
Monday.
Absolutely. As am I.
Eric.
Continuing that same theme, I mean, I have a problem with where the fund balance ends up because it's not just where it ends up, it's the slope of the line that gets us there. And it's not hard to project that it will go down below. And I personally don't feel like it would be financially prudent to say, well, I'll wait to see what happens in the next year legislative for 1920, because then the more you kick the can down the road, the bigger the solution to the problem is, and it becomes more catastrophic. I would rather us try to get a more soft landing and try to minimize those expenses now, rather than waiting out, because then it's going to become catastrophic, and then you are going to, impact schools, impact teachers, impact classrooms. It's going to be unavoidable. And simply saying, well, we'll just lower the 7.5%, all that does is kick the can down even farther. And so I have a real concern about this budget when, I see the slope of the decrease, and I see page 7, and I see how, it was 73 million, and then it's going to end up at 58 million, $15 million decrease. That gives me a $15 million gap. It's not hard to figure out. That number isn't, now we're at 7.5. To think that now that 15 million is going to go to zero doesn't seem, logical. I mean, that's $15 million is a lot of money.
No, I agree.
So it gives me great concern to think, I just don't feel comfortable with the budget is presented now with approving it, because it gives me great concern that it's going to go below 7.5%. To think that we're going to get $15 million more dollars to flatten that out, and that's not even taking into account that the raise is going to make it. We've already said the raise for next year is going to make it even higher. I just don't feel comfortable with that.
Well, we are taking some steps already. So just so you're aware, we've asked schools, this budget is kind of an all-in. However, if a school is not sure of their enrollment, just as Jane had mentioned some charter schools, we've asked them to not necessarily staff those positions and wait until the 5-day count and see if those students are actually going to be there or not. In addition, I think the superintendent has said we are going to have the hard hiring freeze like we used to have back in the day. From the day I started until maybe 2 years ago. So that positions have to come to cabinet. They have to be, those kind of critical areas that we need to fill in order to get the positions filled, so that we can hopefully create lapse dollars there to help offset what is being presented today. I hope that helps. I know it doesn't give you a whole lot of, it doesn't help much, but we're not, it's not as if we're not aware that there's an issue. We're just hopefully.
I think we have mutual concerns. The only difference is the approval of the budget falls on, you guys do wonderful work. Mitzi, I've told you once, and the budget lady, you guys do wonderful, wonderful work.
Her name is Krista.
Krista. that you and Krista do, given what you guys have to go with, you guys do wonderful work, and you're telling us the truth and the facts. Your job is to give us the information, and, I am not trying to imply that there's something faulty in the way.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, the way you give the information is, I'm concerned with the information that we'll get. You understand the distinction?
What you see.
Well, what I see, and it concerns me that we're not going to make more changes than this. I've heard people say, well, we'll just plan on more people retiring, older. And I think that this, given the slope of the line and $15 million, it gives me pause, and it makes me think that I would rather see us do some little bit things like you're saying, but I'm talking about the budget. My thing is talking about the budget, just to approve of the budget. My concern is that it's just kicking the can down the road, making things harder for next year. And, my assumption is the legislature's not going to give you anything. They're going to give you zero, if not a little bit less. I don't see that changing.
That's what I'm hearing also.
I don't see it changing in time, in the foreseen future. But it's nothing that you're doing that's causing my concern. The only thing I would say is, we got to do something about the expenses, because obviously we can't do anything about the revenue. And so we need to do something about the expense side. So,
Jane.
Well, my concern is with required local effort being rolled back for 3 years, and that has cost us
90 million or something. It's a pretty.
It's cost $4 billion. It's cost $4 billion to districts in the state of Florida in 3 years, and almost $100 million for us. Correct. So those are funds that we normally got that have shown the crescendo and the decrescendo of our funding in the last 3 years. So that is something that I'm hoping the legislature will look at a little more closely this next year. But it certainly has impacted our operating budget.
I just came back actually last week. I was at a statewide finance meeting, and the Finance Council actually meets with the State Board of Education, and that is one of our requests, is to restore the required local effort. But again, the views for some are that that's a tax increase, so it'll depend on the way the legislature kind of makes that determination. But I agree with you.
Shirley.
I was talking with, in fact, it was more than one person, and perhaps even, with our sheriff. I mean, they think that as property values went up, we should be rolling in money.
That is
or that we could go out there and raise money. The legislature tells us what our required local effort is, and they've rolled that back, and it's cost us, you say, almost $100 million the last 3 years. And this year, instead of giving even that 47-cent increase, I mean, we actually were cut from what the state gives us. And, and they were, because he was saying, well, this friend was saying, well, property values went up. You should have all that money to pay for these sheriffs. Why are you arguing about who pays for this? And I'm like, we don't have more money. No. And now that, just let them pay 100% because they've got all this money now. We don't have all this money. We don't have an opportunity to go out and get the money. I don't know if any of that was brought up in that discussion on Tuesday. I didn't hear it when I was listening. But I know there's this false impression out there that, when the property values went up, we got all this extra money. We did not.
Yeah, that is
because the legislature rolled back our efforts. The only additional dollars we got was with the referendum, is at that little bit that $1 million went up. But the overall funding decreased, even though the property values went up. We didn't see this for 3 years now.
Maybe at the convocation of governments, we could do that, because I know it's a misconception of most city council members and county commissioners. They say, why don't you just raise taxes to pay for safety and security? And so I have to sit there and explain it, and they tell me I'm wrong, and I tell them no, that's how it is. And
It's very and that conversation has been, I'm glad, so a couple of things. I am concerned with the trend. I know this is nothing new, but I'm concerned that we are maybe unaware, and the unknowns make me nervous when we're at this tipping point right here. I know that historically, I think it's better that we plan for a no change or even a decrease from a state standpoint to be prepared, because we have more control locally than we do up there. So my concern is where the slope to what Eric said is it's trending, and that there are items in here that we may not have even considered allocating. And I think it's specifically around the front loading of a new police department. I know that members of the community had, again, I think to what Shirley's point was about additional funds that we receive based on property taxes, and yes, the $1 million does include to that. And I don't know if there's a better way to illustrate, all of the money this year coming into 18-19, all that is new money from Safe Schools allocation, the various mental health, the additional bump from any property values from the $1 million, to really have that transparent illustration of where the district got the money and specifically what it's using for. Because as we talk about the safety and security component, locally we can set out something to a referendum and have the community vote on a referendum solely for safety and security through the county commission as a pass-through. My understanding is.
Okay.
No, not us. No, it'd be through a resolution. But
yes.
And I keep hearing that, and I think that because the conversation of safety and security is so important to everyone, and the last thing people want to hear is that we can't figure out how to fund it. And so that has obviously been a tipping point. And so I think that just because this was raised to me recently is that if we really are in a deficit and really illustrate that we are prudently spending all of our money, and that in order to get to where we want to go as it relates to safety and security and not compromise our unreserved fund balance, maybe that's a conversation we need to have. But I think before we get there, we need to have a clear outline of what we're using, what we're getting, what we're using it for, and maybe that'll support any variances.
Yeah, I have heard there were, I think, 3 or 4. Sumter County, Palm Beach is talking about increasing because they only do a $250,000 to 1. Quite a few are actually trying to do the 4-year local referendums to help their budget.
But we should be cognizant we just had ours
and we already have ours.
And so, again, I think that's where you scrupulously illustrate what we've got in addition this year, what we're using it for, how best to utilize it, and then where there may be a deficit, because I am terribly concerned about the trend in which we were going.
And so just a word about budget projections. If you look historically, we have a history of, quite honestly, missing wildly in regards to projecting on the expense side. There are years in which our expenses have come in $20 and $30 million less than projected. I can tell you that's not the case in this budget because I have been actively involved. The 3 of us have really worked every number on this sheet. But knowing what salaries are for the next school year, there is no salary increase. Typically what happens is we run payrolls 2 or 3 times, and then we open negotiations at the end of August in September and say, here's the amount of money that we have. We're now able to project those salaries. If you go back to the ratification of the contract, that's where the deficit comes from, is that on average we gave a 3.75% increase to our employees, administrative, classified, and instructional on average. When you offset that with a decrease in the total funds derived from the FEFP, what you did is you funded the salary increase from reserves. The reason I want to take you back to the ratification of that contract is because on that night I was asked very specifically what the impact on our reserve would be in doing a 2-year deal. And my answer was that the fund reserve at the end of this year would fall between 9.5% and 10%, and that is held true. I was asked what the impact on the fund reserve for the 18-19 school year would be, and I said it would be between 7.5% and 8%. Now, I do not anticipate that we have missed our projections by $20, $30 million as we did in past years. But as this budget is implemented, we will certainly have an eye on the expenditure side. I believe that when we arrive at the end of this year, that our fund reserve will be north of 8%. I don't think it'll be a dramatic increase, but I do think that you will have upward movement in the fund reserve. It will be north of 8%. If you make a projection into 1920, and I tell you that's a foreign concept, but it's something that we should be doing, is projecting beyond the next year. We will deliver a budget that conforms to policy at a 7.5% reserve. There are a number of variables that you can account for today. We know that referendum fundings will increase. We know that salaries absent a settlement for 1920 will decrease. There is anticipated savings. The savings from implementing a police department is realized in the 1920 when those officers begin to replace those on contracts. And so that deficit begins to shrink. I can tell you that I have utmost confidence that we'll be able to bring you a budget that does not require dramatic cuts, if any, and conform to board policy at 7.5% for 1920. I have that confidence level as we sit here today.
Eric.
Now that we're ahead of the schedule for raises, and you talked about how that's beneficial, are we going to continue that trend of being ahead of the curve? Are we going to this year negotiate for the next year? You can open up contracts. Are we going to wait and get behind again? Now that we're ahead of the curve, are we going to continue that? Because it adds predictability of the budget process.
Well, we have an added wrinkle that the contract in and of itself expires at the end of the year. And so to open a salary negotiation, yes, I would like to do that. I believe that by doing a 2-year deal, it means that now you start doing 1-year deals and you're negotiating the next year, and it provides cost certainty. In this current year, we made a strategic decision that says that our employees deserve a raise, and we're going to fund those raises out of reserves. Raises in future years will not come from reserves. They will come from allocations from the state. And I think that's something we all need to be attuned to as we go into the legislative session, which is an increase in the base student allocation will manifest itself in an increase in salaries. A decrease will probably result in a decrease in salaries. Status quo results in status quo. And so as we look at the legislative session, I would want to open negotiations when we have a read on what the legislature is doing. But to have that settled before the 1st of July, absolutely, that would be the goal. But understand, it's not just a salary negotiation this time around, is that it is a renegotiation of 2 entire contracts that expire on the 30th of June, 2019.
Any other questions, comments?
I'm just on the record. I have, as a business owner, and I've had downturns and recession. Hopefully, when you say decrease in salaries, you're not talking about decrease in individual pays. You're talking about decrease in total salary expense.
Increases.
Well, no, he said if there's an increase from the state, it's increased. If it stays the same, and then he said when it decreases, I would expect a decrease in salary. And I assume when you're talking about increase in salary, you're talking about pay raises. You weren't trying to infer that we would have decrease in people's individual pay.
No, if you're asking me to project into 1920, if the state for some reason decreased the base student allocation, we would have to have a conversation about whether you took an across-the-board decrease in salaries, which, to answer your question, would affect individuals, or whether you wanted to go through it through staffing allocations. But a decrease in the base student allocation, there would have to be a corresponding action. And yes, you've summarized the 2 options that would be available to us, is that you cannot continue to hold required local effort consistent. You cannot continue to make cuts in the unrestricted funds that allows us to pay our employees and expect that salaries would be maintained, much less increased. I mean, that is the dilemma, is that you cannot get to where we need to go without an in-depth conversation of required local effort. Is that the base student allocation is not just a conversation about the operation of this school district, it's a discussion about the operation of charter schools. It is the lifeblood of public education, and the more that the base student allocation is restricted, our ability to fairly compensate our employees and to appropriately serve our students at some point is going to be affected. There's no way around that.
Shirley.
At one point, before we talked about what the base student allocation would be, or the required local effort, I think you had said that you were expecting the salaries to decrease next year, but that was before we talked about the state dollars. But we're expecting, as we have year after year, as the overall budget for salaries has gone down as we're having more senior members retire. I mean, I think you were talking about that in the beginning, where you
correct, absolutely. You've taken the cap off of salaries. There's no longer you get to step 30 and you get one-time money. And so what I refer to as the churn, which is every time you have an employee who's been with us 35 years retire and you replace with a 1-year employee, is that if you were to project salaries, and I tell you, Krista and Mitzi and I have great fun, lively debates, I will say, in regards to, but if I were projecting the 1920 budget now, I would decrease salaries by 1.5 to 2%. I'm not saying I would decrease what we pay our employees, is that you get a decrease in the salary expenditure between 1.5 and 2% just based on every retiree being replaced by new
Yeah,
teachers.
I think that was the decrease that Eric was talking about, because I don't think any of us really talked about that the base student allocation would go down. I mean, I think the legislature would know better than to do something like that.
No, I think Eric made a very astute comment, is that he seized
right.
upon a statement that I made that says where the base student allocation goes is where salaries go. I mean, if it goes up, salaries go up. If it stays the same, salaries stay the same. And God forbid it goes down, salaries have to go down. I mean, the base student allocation is the lifeblood of public education. If you are an educator in this state, your eyes had better be on the base student allocation.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you. I appreciate it. Moving right along, outstanding student and school achievements. Steve Cantis, Chris Runoff, and Brian Hirsch.
Give us some good news, guys.
Hello there. Good morning, everybody. So are we all set PowerPoint-wise? Brendan, are we set with the PowerPoint? Hold up. As he's getting
Where's
that
Steve?
PowerPoint,
Oh.
Steve is...
Sorry to throw him out there. He's just on the list.
So, Steve, we're representing Steve.
There you
today.
go.
So
We'll-
he
we'll
is
be
very,
fine.
very busy, and so he is very confident in our ability to
No
convey
problem,
that.
no
So-
problem.
So I appreciate the opportunity again to share outstanding student and school achievements. Back in December, you may remember, Brian was here, and he was here to share mid-year success stories. Well, backed by popular demand, only as a true artist can convey, Brian has been asked to highlight second semester celebratory stories. And so we're going to be highlighting just a few things, but in a wonderful story-like presentation. So with that, Brian, I think we're ready to go.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. I thank you so much for the opportunity. As artists tell stories, they're also often collaborators. So I really want to thank many of the folks that we've worked with to pull this information, especially our team, Jessica DiLorenzo and Maria Schindler-Luera as well. So one of the things we really wanted to share with you is this amazing community support of the scholarship opportunities that are right here local to our students. To frame that picture just a little bit, when we walk through things, we had about 2,222 students that just met our graduation requirements. That number is evolving as there are some things that are happening over the summer as well. But to paint that picture, another artist metaphor, a little bit further, last year's average of cost of public universities in Florida, including tuition, room, board, fees, transportation, book supplies, expenses, all kinds of things. That's about $21,790 last year, just in Florida, for Florida resident students. When you take a look at that, for private universities and colleges, that on a national average is about $50,900 that our students are facing. Yet, we have great support in this community. Let's see if this remote is working. Can I get it? Brandon, would you be so kind? Thank you to Advance. Thank you. We had it all set up. Technology is fabulous sometimes. We have amazing support within this community. There are more than 82 providers just locally that students have the opportunity to connect with that can help offset those costs that you saw. That might mean over 200 unique scholarship opportunities at some of our places and mainstays, such as Selby Scholars and the Selby Foundation, the Gulf Coast Community Foundation, and the Community Foundation of Sarasota County as well. So just this year, our students are at about, our seniors were about at $4.4 million and rising. of scholarships awarded just from this area and community alone, which is really quite an accomplishment. If you'd be so kind to get to the next, thank you. When we take a look just at school by school, and these are evolving and coming in as well, Booker High, their seniors had about $4.9 million. Pineview, about 8.6 over 4 years. And when we look at Bright Futures as well, that's about 3.1 million at Pineview. Sarasota High at about $6.2 million, 2.5 for the Bright Futures. Suncoast Poly, 1.75. Is how many scholarships students received there, and Bright Futures about 840. Venice High, $8.4 million, and the Bright Futures was about $2 million.
So it's all over 4 years, each one, or because I know
You only put that on Pineview. So
I did. So that's the projections. And by the way, those are evolving and revolving because the schools don't know the exact amounts that are coming. So yes, over 4 years for those students that are coming in,
including Venice High.
Including Venice High.
Okay.
Yeah. So Northport just came in, and about $4 million were awarded to their seniors, and about $150,000 just for this year for their Bright Futures. So the future is indeed bright for our students coming through. And by next year, when I talk to Dr. Dawn Clayton as well, we'll be able to actually track where the students have gone and how they're progressing in their school as well. So really just significant. But again, just a snapshot and overview at the resources that our students have to offset those costs as we go forward, which is really pretty amazing as well. Would you advance to the next? Thanks so much. Now, of course, our college planning doesn't just start in high school alone. We had some great activity in our middle schools as well this year with our college and career advisors. So really significant to really begin that roadmap. When I talked to Nick Termine from Booker Middle and M. Hagan from Venice Middle School as well, they gave some of their success stories. One of the charges was to really expose students to at least 100 different career opportunities. And really starting with the prompt of, I want to be, what I want to be, and what sort of skills do we need to get there, to be that. Some of the other skills and things we might have utilized, Road Trip Nation, an amazing sort of television series that takes students all over the country, exploring different careers and opportunities, but also within our own community as well. Career fairs and career days within those schools, bringing our community to the schools before we set them out into that area. And of course, starting to leverage digital platforms as well, like Navient, really supported by our Education Foundation, which as we roll forward into the future is really going to help customize the individual and unique experiences of each student, both in their career opportunities, matching their skills with their needs and their desires and their interests as we move forward. But speaking of road trips, if you could go one more, we took a road trip of our own with students throughout this year, visiting our local area colleges. So each of our middle schools had visits at least these colleges: Ringling College, USF, SM, SCF, State College of Florida, and STC, our very own Suncoast Technical College.
Was that the first time? Was that the first time we did that initiative where to bring students to our local colleges? Because when I chaired youth leadership, that was something that you'd find all the time these students weren't even aware of the local colleges.
I would say this is the first time it's been more systemic, that there's a universal approach, school by school, and that these are things that are rolling forward, and we were working with our partners within those universities, because there may be a class-to-class situation previously. This is now more systemic in our approach, that this is happening at all of our middle schools and evaluating all of our students to see where they want to go. So right here in this picture, of course, I'm going to have some arts biases to an extent. This is our Booker Middle School students visiting Ringling College to really dig in and take a look at animation and digital design, which is significant how our local economy can really impact the national and global stage when we look at these kind of pieces of Ringling College.
Do we only take middle schools on these college visits, or do we also do high school students?
This specific program is really targeted at the middle schools. It doesn't mean that there aren't opportunities for high schools as well, who are certainly doing that, but this piece was really focusing on our middle school opportunities with that effort from our career and college advisors. I'm sure that our high schools are taking care of things in a different way as well, but this was the real push for our middle schools to get them exposure, access, knowledge of what's out there in the world, but also really what's significant within our own community, to say that these great things that are happening, you have pathways to success within Sarasota County alone.
If you wait till high school, you've almost waited too long, because you have to really make a decision as to where you go to school. If you want to go to Suncoast Technical College in your junior and senior year, you've got to make sure you take your core courses at a regular high school in the 9th and 10th grade before you can go there. So there are a lot of things that I think are just great about doing this for that reason.
Yes, it's never too soon, and I'm sure Chris can tell you more of that effort, even really expanding to our elementaries as we look next year. And even if you ask my own kids, they might tell you what PhDs and so forth they may want to try to achieve, which is fascinating. Yes, exciting indeed. It's true. If you advance to the next, thank you so much. While we started this presentation with our students who were leaving our school district and system, we wanted to spend a little bit of time on the students who are just arriving and beginning. And when we were going to do this, we were really talking about the different literacy and learning initiatives that are happening, maybe something with Up With Books and great things. But what we really realized is the amount of community support and effort there is to STEM summer slides with great things like our Suncoast campaign for learning, that there is a great push to set our students up for success right now. So we really began to explore what is that community support and what does it look like to stop summer slide, and to really also then build a platform to launch our incoming students with. So I'm going to go over some really great details with our Summer Learning Academy. So talk about success stories. This is so incredibly present. We've made a significant investment in our Summer Learning Academies, just as we talked about. That's 11 schools that we're in. 7 are brand new right now. So that's when we look at our enrollment from just last week, we had 1,082 students enrolled in our Summer Learning Academies. That's K and 1, kindergarten and first grade at our 7 new sites. At 3 of our sites, that's K and 2. And finally at Alta Vista, that's K through 3, where we include that.
What are the new schools?
So the new schools, don't make me list every single one.
So you've got Atwater, Cranberry, Glen Allen, Lamarck. Yep. So then you have up in North County, you have Fruitville.
Yep.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to try and help.
So Fruitville, let's see, how many is that? That's
Brentwood.
5. Brentwood, Wilkinson are partnering because Brentwood is under construction, so they're both occupying Wilkinson's campus. And there may be one other.
About Garden?
Garden is not, because they were just added as a
Because they were just added, so they will start next year.
That would be the hope. But just exceeding everyone, including the parents and the administration's expectations.
The hope, so there could be a chance Garden doesn't get it?
I'm sorry?
You said that's the hope.
Always like to anticipate.
It will.
So that's great. I love to hear that commitment.
So certainly quite a scale this summer as we look, but you can see a great engagement and participation with 1,082 students. Our great partners in the Community Foundation would often tell you that summer learning and all learning is also a 2-generational approach. So we have 774 parents who are enrolled in the Parent University options. There are over 70 different classes and options this summer at those 11 sites for parents to participate in. I'll get into a little bit more detail about that in just a moment. Our afternoon enrollment, so the students who are sticking around for some cultural, other learning experiences in the afternoon, is about 765. But I want to give you some hot off the press information from our research assessment and evaluation team led by Dr. Denise Canalupo. Some really significant things. We want to, in an effort always to mitigate absenteeism and increase attendance. So some figures from last year's Summer Learning Academies show us, on an average, for the kindergartens that participated in last year's Summer Learning Academies and then during the school year, they missed, on average, 3.5 fewer days of school than their peers that did not participate. Our first graders last year who participated in the Summer Learning Academies, they missed 4.5 fewer days than their peers that did not participate in the Summer Learning Academies. When you break that down by school, and I don't have all of those school information, but for example, the trends are significant when you look at, say, Emma E. Booker. So both from their K and 1 students participating in the Summer Learning Academy last year, those students missed 6.5 fewer days than their peers that did not participate. So we know that absenteeism, especially with our elementary students, is a family and a multi-generational issue. So again, the 2-gen issue. Yet with students and investments in our students and parents through our SLAs, we know our families are now more likely to be present in their school. So check this out, if we could roll to the next for just a moment. If they're on campus, there are increased opportunities for engagement. So as seen here, we've got some cultural experiences and parent universities. I'm going to walk you through that just a teeny bit because our team has had some planning with those cultural experiences. There's at least 4 different unique experiences per grade level over those 6 weeks. This is really building off the work of EdExplore, srq.com, to really provide experiential learning, and great support has come from our community, contributions, even including our school and district administrators, to make some of these experiences happening, from our very own Riverview Planetarium for kindergartners, also say the Ringling Museum for kindergartners as well. The Van Wezel is in residence at our first grades for every single first grade in the Summer Learning Academy. And I just want to say we are leveraging new opportunities every single year from our community to be able to do that. So our friends, for example, from Oslo Repertory Theater, so this Thursday, brand new, Oslo Repertory Theater has created a special student matinee to welcome all of our 2nd and 3rd grade students to attend a special performance of The Jungle Book. So these kind of opportunities, again, the generosity of our organizations and our community donors as well to really make these things happen has been incredible as we continue to move forward and expand and offer more opportunities for our students. We've also maximized some of the opportunities from our very own resident experts, that being our arts teachers. So for example, on the left, you might have seen, perfect, that's one of our students at Alta Vista who just went through an experience with Alicia Loomis, who happens to be the art teacher at Gulfgate, doing Mexican sun designs to explore life and energy as well. So that crossover between art and science as well. And in South County, all of those South County schools have had a residency visit from music teachers Chris and Teresa Riley to explore music and movement. And again, really significant what we heard loud and clear from our schools in the South County, how to deliver great experiences to them that they may be more traditionally distant from some of the opportunities up here in the north part of the county. But all of those students in those South County schools will be visiting Venice Theater for Seussical the Musical on their final day of the Summer Learning Academy. Again, generously provided by the folks at Venice Theater to make that opportunity happen. When we talk about parent universities, there are many, many different ways. I remember over 70 different experiences for our parents, including financial planning, health and nutrition. This is a class over here again at Alta Vista by an Alta Vista parent, our very own Maria Shidler-Luera. Her husband's over there on the right side. Will Luera, who happens to be the director of improv at FST. This is No More Drama, Improv for Life, a theater class that really provides theater and mindfulness, helping families with communication and empowering parents, not just to be the actors or the players, but the writers, directors, and producers of their very own lives as well. So if we can go to our last, ultimately, we want our students to feel safe, to be safe, and to feel cared for. We believe in them, and we want them to believe in themselves. Our arts integration specialist, Jessica DiLorenzo, has created a special residency just for those Northport SLAs called Breath and Character. Here she sets our students up for being part of a school and classroom learning experience, building classroom culture and taking command of their minds and bodies. So she would tell us, as we're about to see, students begin with hand gestures to help focus and calm their minds. They then choose the feelings they would like to embody. This group at Cranberry, just last week, this group chose happy, great, peaceful, and calm. They start by saying it out loud, and then they repeat it a few times in a whisper. Eventually, the students are asked to just think the words in their mind and feel them in their hearts. Let's take a quick look. Thanks, Brandon.
Say it again out loud. Ready? Remember to touch your fingers. I am happy. I am great. I am peaceful. I am calm. Keep your eyes closed. Let's just try to whisper it this time. I am happy. I am great. I am peaceful. I am strong. Keep going.
So really, this is setting our students up for success. With calm, focused, balanced students and parents, the Summer Learning Academies are a launching pad to achievement, just like our seniors heading off to college or our middle school students exploring career pathways. Sarasota County Schools, we are preparing students and families to lead successful lives full of opportunity in our district and beyond. Thank you.
I want it like that. So good. Eric.
Thank you very much. And I really like the attendance numbers. I think that's really good. But one of the core impotence of doing the Summer Learning Academy was this Summer Learning Slide. And so I was, and one of the great things about Alta Vista is they track that and they're able to tell you. And I know we do the iReady 3 and they use the iReady 1. So what do we have showing the, how expanding this has affected the Summer Learning Slide?
We don't have that information just yet. Obviously, they're just they just started their third week. And so that information is being monitored, both attendance, both for children and for families. They are administering, obviously, they have the AP3 that they will use. They will administer that, and we will also have survey data over the summer to kind of get a feel from both the foundation but also a district perspective of how has it really prepared these kids from readiness.
Can we get that information when it becomes available?
Absolutely.
And this is a 6-week program, correct?
Correct.
We started it as a 7-week program at Alta Vista.
We did.
And so we'll know something about their proficiency at the end, at the beginning, at the end, and then at the beginning of school.
Correct.
As well.
But we're and to go historically, when it started, we weren't tracking it for great things, but as we've expanded it, it's been very focused to
the data is absolutely trending up. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you all for your commitment and support of the program. We even had, when you add 7 new schools, 11 sites, that is just a tremendous undertaking. But I just had to say to the coordinators, the principals, we have lots of initiatives happening on campus, summer reading, ESY, summer school, et cetera. They just took it in stride. The coordinators have just jumped on board, and it is just blowing us out of the water. And here's the thing. When folks who didn't know about it now are asking and understand that this is offered by our schools, I mean, it is just such a positive vibe out there. And so to see those little ones day one, they're going to be the leaders when they return back to school in August. It is just incredible.
And we have to say thanks to our partners, Mary Kay and Joe Hansen, who originally started this philanthropy by supporting Alta Vista, and to the Community Foundation, and to other funding partners now who have gotten on board, because it really has been amazing. And of course, the arts element, which Brian and I just absolutely love, the afternoons of arts and all of the things that involves. Thank you.
That's what I was going to add, though, just at Explore and the arts integration and seeing it how it's just expanded, and especially to access and tap into students who oftentimes wouldn't be able to see what makes Sarasota so well known around the world. It makes me so excited. So thank you. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you, guys.
He's going to chair that committee.
He arrived just on time. Okay, next is Granicus and E-Agenda. Let me pull that up. Joe. Hello.
Good morning. Pleasure to be here. We're in the unenviable situation of following Brian and his presentation on that.
I'm excited about this presentation, though.
Students. But with that being said, I have perhaps an equally talented person, but in talent and very different talents, in Mr. Ray Ebersol, and he's going to lead the discussion on the options for the board.
Good morning.
Gentlemen, good to see you again. I have Byron from Granicus, and I have Nenga and Marty from E-Agenda. And Byron, you were going to go first?
Sure, that'd be great.
And he has a PowerPoint that he's going to go through, and then he can click on a demo so that you can also see everything that's going to go on. So he's going to present, and Brandon will get him ready.
Okay, great.
Fantastic. We ready?
Ready to go.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate the time today, folks. My name is Byron Gillen. I'm the Regional Director of Granicus, and I've dedicated the last 20 years of my life working with school districts and government agencies here in Florida, revolved around legislative management. And that's our focus, 100% at Granicus, is to work with school districts and government agencies on legislative management and citizen engagement. So that's what we focus on. So 100% government, and the whole vision here is we're going to talk today specifically on how to help you folks at the board prepare for the meetings and be prepared, but we need to think about the whole big picture here. How do the parents, how do our citizens, how do we get information and find that information on our site and have it communicated to us? This is the parents, right? So it's not just the internal processes, and folks, it's that whole journey. All right, so that's what we're going to look at today. So if you look at the whole process, if you think about legislative management, what the heck is that? So what it is internally, we have a lot of stuff going on. We have items and policies that need to be discussed internally, get approvals and collaboration on these documents by the staff. And so what we have to do is find a way to automate that process, track our changes efficiently, and move it effectively through the actual organization. So we've demonstrated that to your team already. We're going to assume that that process has already taken place, and we're going to go ahead and jumpstart into how it affects you folks and how we can actually prepare for those meetings, and then what it means at the end of the day for the public to be able to find that information, okay? So when you look at the whole journey here, we're going to assume that internal process has already been actually worked on, and what I'm going to focus on is what Granicus brings to the table that's unique, right? Because at the end of the day, we have to pick the right tool for Sarasota Public Schools. All right? So that being said, let's go ahead and jump in and take a look at what it looks like here. All right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to log in as a member of the actual board, one of you folks, and we're going to prepare for those meetings. Now, I left my iPad in my tablet there, but you can, or in my backpack, but you can use any device you want. You can use a tablet, cell phone, laptop, computer. You could be anywhere, okay? So it could be an app, or it can be online. So if you're at home, you're at the office, you can log in from anywhere and see the same notes you worked on from any other device. So I'm going to log in as one of your fellow board members right now. His name is Henry Fonda, okay? Henry Fonda's an old school, okay? And it's going to be a transition for him to move from the movie scripts on paper, agendas on paper, to an electronic process. We have to keep it simple, right? But give them the functionality and make life easier. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to log in as our friend Henry Fonda here. And again, you could be on a device, a tablet, laptop, computer, cell phone, wherever it is. So when I log in as Henry here, the first thing it's going to do is instantly log you in and show you the next meeting's agenda. And it should be in the format you already recognize. It's the same look and feel of your paper, of your PDFs, same look and feel, so the learning curve should be pretty straightforward. Now, when I'm looking at this particular agenda, notice I didn't download anything. I don't need PDF. I don't need apps. I don't need anything. However, if you want to install an app, you're absolutely more than welcome to. But the thought process here is to make it simple and easy, right? Now, when I'm scrolling through here, a lot of times when you go say, okay, we want to talk about the new Therapy Works project that we did at the Sarasota schools. Go to page 72 of your big packet, and you're flipping through the packet there, and it's challenging to get through that, especially if you're on a PDF and a long scrolling PDF, having to click a link and it jumps to a point of the document, you get lost pretty quickly, right? So here, what we will do is you just simply click or tap on the item, and it presents the item for you. Very simple, very efficient. This is not a new window. We have my brothers and sisters, we all bought my mom an iPad last week, and she's technically challenged. And when she goes to websites and new windows start popping up and new tabs start popping up, she's lost immediately, and she just won't use it. So we learned that lesson here years ago. Okay, I've been doing this for over 20 years now. So years ago, we learned that that was a challenge. So this is not a new window. It has all the functionality of opening a new window, but it's the same window. So when you're done, you can either hit the little red X or the close button, and you're right back on your agenda. Possible for us to get lost, right? So very, very easy. Now, we're in preparation mode right now. We're not currently in the meeting. So I'm picturing you with a glass of wine or wherever you're at home, getting ready for your meeting, okay? So that's what we're doing right now. When I'm looking at this information here, this is the information that your team internally has already collaborated on and built and put on the agenda, okay? Now, what's unique about Granicus versus the other solutions in the marketplace is we're not just focused on the documents. It's the data that's the all-star that we're talking about in these meetings. Contracts, Therapy Works. Anytime I want to see anything revolved around Therapy Works, I want to have the ability to track that. When does that contract expire? Make sure we notify it. Show me all the times we've talked about Therapy Works in the past. So it's not just the actual documents that anyone can actually make electronic, it's the data itself. So what we can do with that data is really cool here. So how many of you guys have legal backgrounds? I do not. Not officially? Okay. All right, so looking through a 50, 60-page contract. So but looking through contracts, what are the big things you look at? Indemnification clauses, right? Contracts, what's the value? There's certain key things in a contract you need to know about. Do you really need to see the other 59 and a half pages, right? So the thought process here is that as the team's working on these contracts, we can summarize sections of that contract on this sheet for you. Okay, it doesn't necessarily need to be part of the public materials or whatever, but by doing that and having that data that's important to you displayed here, hopefully it's keeping you from even having to click on the contract because you have all the relevant information right there in front of you, thus cutting down your preparation time and hopefully making the meeting run smoother as well. Okay, so that's the thought process here. Now, as we're preparing, Therapy Works, very important project for Sarasota schools. We have things we want to talk about amongst ourselves in the meeting. So I want to make notes to myself. You can put notes right on top of the item as well as the back of material and documents as well. So the document, hey, we need to change the indemnification clause. I don't know where Therapy Works is, but let's say they're in Texas. We need to change it from Texas to Florida, right? So I may make a note here to remind myself in the meeting, we need to bring this up. We'll prove it with conditions to be able to do that, right? This really cool about this note is obviously it's photo searchable by you, but it's tied to this item. When you guys renew Therapy Works a year from now, or discuss it in a second reading or third reading, guess what? This note that's private just to you is attached to this item automatically. So as we discuss it over time, we're not having to go through and flip through our old PDFs or old documents to find that note. It's all attached to the same thing, helping us be better prepared and organized. Okay? And then obviously you can research all this information as well. So if I wanted to type in Therapy Works, what it does is it goes through all your documents. So it'll find, every time we've talked about Therapy Works, it'll go through all your agendas and minutes and find that information in the Meetings tab. Underneath the Items tab, finds all your documents, and then obviously any personal notes you made about Therapy Works.
I have a quick question.
Please.
Who organizes and uploads all that for it to, I mean, is that you guys, or in turn, would it be you? So how does that work?
So this process right here. So first thing, when you start, your staff members internally at Sarasota Schools will make a submittal. Hey, we need to get this Therapy Works item on the agenda. So they're going to fill out a form and attach all their backup material.
Same as what it is.
Then it processes through the internal team, HR or the finance, legal, whoever else needs to see it, and collaborate on it so the administrative team can track changes internally. So all that's being done internally first, before you guys get it, which is the 1, 2, 3, fourth part. So I'm in the fourth part of this kind of chain here.
Okay.
I skipped over the first part.
No worries, I just wanted to, okay.
We're in 15 minutes.
Here.
I love the notes.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool.
Yes.
My question is like, so I have a policy, and I want to instead of, I write notes, but I also want to be able to underline something or strike something out. Within the body of the document. Can I do that?
Absolutely can. But that would be an app. Okay, so what I'm showing you is the online version of it. We have an app called iLegislate. And on iLegislate, you can, you know how you can kind of highlight things and you can circle, just like similar you do probably have done in a PDF before, same functionality. But you would need the app to be able to do that kind of functionality. And the reason why is Safari, Mac, works different than Droid and Microsoft, right? From the browser standpoint. If you have the app, then you can do those type of things, and it's saved to your local profile. So again, as it gets rescheduled on the app, you'll see all that markups. Okay. Do we have another question?
Not a question, but in the interest of time, you're at about halfway, so I just want to make sure you have an opportunity to cover everything.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. Okay, so now what we're going to do, so any other questions? Well, let's hold the questions.
We'll let you finish, sorry about that.
I appreciate it, no problem at all. So let's get into the meeting itself, okay? We're in the actual meeting. How does this look different? All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in as an administrator that's actually running the meeting, so maybe like Kathy over there that actually is doing the minutes and what have you. So this is probably an interface you guys will never see again, okay? But I'll show it to you anyway, just to show you the simplicity of the tool and how you can actually run the meeting. Because what's going to happen here is when we're in the meeting, we want to see how simple it is to actually do that. So what I'm going to do is go to my minutes here and go to the June 28th meeting. Click Edit Minutes, okay? Now, our solution has the ability to add in full video streaming. And with video streaming, what's cool about that is as you're doing your minutes, it'll put index points on the videos. So as a citizen, or as a parent, I only care about Therapy Works, I can jump right to that part of the video, right? And see all the documents attached to it. So that's done automatically. That's what those little buttons in the upper right-hand corner, start recording, and when you want to show that live stream to the public. So when I click Start Meeting, a little record button comes up, and you can actually decide which meeting we're actually on. So when I click that little red button here next to an item, it puts an index point on that item. It lets all of you know in yellow that we're on that item, and on this screen in the room, it could show we're on this particular item as well. Okay? So that one click of a button does all three of those things. All right? So if I go back to your particular interface here as a board member, what do you see during the meeting? Okay, so what I'm going to do is open this up in a new tab, log in again as our friend Henry Fonda. Okay. All right, and when I log in as you folks, there is so in the upper right-hand corner, this is defaulted to the agenda layout because it looks just like the agenda. I kind of prefer this tablet layout because it gives you more information. On the left-hand side here, you not only see the paper version on the right, but on the left, it shows you in yellow where we're at. So many times you've been in a meeting and you're skipping around items, right? It gives you the ability to instantly see, rather than go to page 72 or 110, you see in yellow exactly where you're at, which is this particular item right here. Okay? Now, when I click on that particular item, it'll show me all the relevant information over here on the right. Any items that are red, after you've prepared for the meeting with that glass of wine a couple nights ago, if any changes or edits are made, it instantly, if you've looked at it before, instantly will show red, showing there's been an edit here, right? So it tracks your changes, so you know there's an edit revision, and you can go and do it. That's what the red is. This little icon means you made a note. This little icon means there's backup material. All right, so that's how you guys would follow along in the actual meeting. Okay? Now it's time to vote on the item. So let's show you how the electronic voting can work. All right? So we're going to go ahead and go back to this person. Now, again, you guys would never see this screen. This would be someone who's actually running the meeting. Okay? So when a motion's actually made, we would actually click 1 next to the person making the motion, 2 next to the person that seconded it. So Henry Fonda made the motion, John Wayne seconded it, created the motion, added it right to the minutes, and it writes it in your minutes template for you. The motion was made by so, was seconded by so, and so, et cetera, right? Now, when it's time to vote, I did it manually here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click Open Voting so you can see what the interface would look like. It instantly grays out your machine, shows you the motion that's on the table, and then you click for, against, or abstain. Now, we're all human beings. We make mistakes, right? So when you click the button, you have to confirm your vote, right? So make sure you click the right button. If you didn't, you cancel vote and click the right button. Now again, you still might click the wrong button twice. No problem. You can tell the person that's actually running the meeting, say, okay, hey, I clicked the wrong button, I can change it. But what's really cool for the person running the meeting, look what happened. All those votes are automatically up there, automatically writes it out in your minutes, and on that screen that's in the room here, this screen right here, it could show the public something like this. Your nice logo, the item, the motion, breakdown of your names, and how everyone voted. So there's no confusion on everything is. Great presentation on the video, too, because it shows it internally as well. All right, so any questions here? Now I'm finished with the functionality piece that affects you folks. Obviously, there's a lot of back-end stuff for reporting on TherapyWorks, goal tracking for the superintendent and you folks, the board, tying items to goals. That's where we really play, is focusing on the data, not just the documents. So we can make sure that we can run reports. How are we doing with teacher retention or student retention, student progress, and see all items tied to that. That's what our focus is, not just the documents that we also do present. Okay? So any questions or thoughts on the functionality there? Okay. Well, I'm sure you have questions. Go ahead, please.
Any school districts in Florida using this program?
We do. We have close to 4,000 clients. 2,000 of them are in this legislative management area. Being living here in Florida, we have probably about 100 clients in Florida using it. Clients as big as Miami-Dade, Broward schools, all the way down to the smaller populations as well. So we have quite a few of them as well.
And a lot of our local government, I know, I believe, I've seen it on when I look up their agendas. I know that they also use it. So from the user side, I've found it very friendly as well.
And that's what Granicus brings to the table. We've been doing this for 20 years. So we're by far the largest legislative management company out there that's focused on this. And it's the whole journey.
And City of Sarasota.
And the City of Sarasota, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, it's that journey, it's the whole citizen journey. It's not just your documents, the data. So as a parent, eventually you can add in things like communications, so I can sign up for everything that has to do with TherapyWorks, and rather than physically going to your website and actually seeing that information, it'll be send me the email and text, so every time TherapyWorks is discussed. So we really want to work with Sarasota Schools, not just at this project, but an overall long-term vision on really engaging the parents in the community. That's our focus. Okay, any other questions or thoughts?
Surely.
What about the cost? I don't know if you're the one or you, and how does it compare to other ones
E-agenda.
we've looked at.
Right, so with the actual agenda, so it should be in the back of material, it's an annual cost with the electronic voting of $5,950 a year. And there's a one-time setup fee, right? It's
$2,350, somewhere around there. And that includes the training for you and for Kathy, and it's done an online training. It's not a physical here on-site training, so it's an online training that they do.
Is that including the video streaming in
It does not include the video streaming in that quote. That
I
is
have the
separate.
price for the video
Okay.
streaming.
That's-
The actual ability to do the indexing and all that, as you can see, is included in the minutes, but the actual stream itself would be an additional cost.
Okay. Questions? Anyone? When does our contract, is it expired with e-agenda?
Nenga?
Yeah, the contract will expire this end of the month.
Okay, so we need to make a decision pretty soon, like today. No, all right.
And what was the cost for e-agenda? I forget.
They're up next.
They're up next. Yeah, they're gonna.
$1,000 to $24,000.
The initial cost is $25,000. Yes, sir.
$24,000.
Okay.
Is that what?
Yes, that's in the documentation on page 49 of Agenda Plus.
Yeah, I was looking at it. I wasn't sure if this was e-agenda that we were looking at.
This is Granicus.
Perfect. Before we begin speaking about e-agenda,
Yeah.
do we have any other
No,
questions
fair
for
enough.
Byron?
So I just want to make sure that the only difference on what the items that you talked about today, so two questions are on the minutes and capturing the vote.
Yes, ma'am.
Does it transcribe minutes out beyond the voting? I'm just trying to reduce the minutes of the meeting, and I don't know if that works with the video software or if that's separate. I'm just trying to clarify the minutes. It uploads into the minutes, so
It does.
is it just nothing else beyond the voting?
First, seconds, how everyone voted, and so it could do your 85% of it.
Okay.
Now, how you folks are communicating in the discussion, well, you could do shorthand probably during the meeting, and maybe after the meeting, go in and fine tune it if you want to get to that point.
Okay.
We do have a lot of clients, unfortunately, in the Florida landscape that we are in. There's a lot of legal issues going on
Yeah.
with closed captioning. Closed captioning would be a transcript, and that does provide transcripts. So if you ever go down video and do closed captioning, you would have your transcripts.
Okay.
But that is separate.
That's separate. That's what I
Yes.
wanted to, okay.
So the minutes is included in this tool. It'll get you about 85% of the way. If you do summary minutes, even closer than that.
Okay, Shirley?
Somebody asked me, this past week, how can they track what votes members took? And when I went back on the agenda,
Yes.
the current agenda doesn't show what the votes are. You have to go into the next meeting, and the minutes of the next meeting.
Correct.
Do these, would these votes show up, or would you have to go to the minutes of the meeting of the next one to get the votes?
No, they would show up at that particular meeting type. So our vision here is
So
it's
if we
not
go
just the
to
document.
today's meeting,
Yes.
we would, 3 weeks from now, we could see how people voted. We wouldn't have to go to the following meeting's minutes.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your
Thank you
time.
very, very
Appreciate
much.
the opportunity. Thank you.
And next we have Agenda Plus, which is e-agenda, and have Nenga and Marty as business manager. So Nenga's going to present, and Marty's going to stand over there also.
Okay, thank you. Hello.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Marty Goldmans. I'm the Business Development Manager for Agile Tech. We're a Florida-based company located in Jacksonville. And we are also the creators of what you're going to see today, the Agenda Plus solution. In addition, we also, you may be familiar with Agile Tech because we currently maintain the e-agenda. We maintain and support the e-agenda platform that you're using today. Normally, our product specialist, Mark Vickers, does most of our demos, but he's unable to make it today. So I've been able to bring Nenga Mystica, who's going to actually do the demo and help me out with the solution. So you'll be seeing our new Agenda Plus platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm going to minimize this.